Hello, and welcome to Electrifying Growth, a podcast brought to you by Edison Partners. I'm Chris Sugden, managing partner here at Edison and your host. There are moments in a person or company's journey that are undeniably electric. The spark or sparks, if you will, that propel you or your company to new heights. With Electrifying Growth, we're here to have in-depth, real conversations with great leaders who have been there and done it before. Edison has been investing in high-growth technology companies for more than 35 years, and I have been here at Edison doing this investing piece for more than 20 years. We've led over 225 investments. We understand that it takes great leaders and visionaries to build market leaders. We are your support system, a CEO and management's entourage, if you will. Let's introduce this episode's guest. Welcome to another episode of Electrifying Growth. Today's guest is Louise Hill, the founder and CEO of UK GoHenry. The company actually merged with a business called Acorns, and we'll talk about that on today's episode as well. But Louise Hill is a serial entrepreneur, as you'll hear, again, co-founder and CEO of GoHenry, which at the time was only a prepaid debit card, but it became so much more in terms of a financial education app for kids. The design here to teach kids and teens about money, how to manage it, how to think about spending it, how to invest it. Just a cool app. Again, GoHenry.com. Founding GoHenry in 2012, Louise overseeing the global expansion of the business. She was COO and then became CEO again in 2023 when the companies merged. Under her leadership, GoHenry has grown its customer base to over 2 million in the US and the UK. And the company's also expanded into Europe, including countries of France, Italy, and Spain. The company acquired a business called Pixpay in 2022 that allowed them that on-continent footprint, if you will. GoHenry merged with Acorns, as I said, about a year and a half ago in 2023. And now sort of the single point of the kid's journey all the way to the adult's journey in the combined business, which we'll talk about on today's episode. She's one of the top female fundraisers. She broke fundraising records in 2018. GoHenry and its others secured over $100 million in financing, which was just tremendous. You know, women entrepreneurs are often thought of as not being backed, and Louise Hill is a perfect example of one who had broken through. Behind her professional achievements, she is a passionate advocate for financial education and financial literacy. She serves as a trustee at the Center for Financial Capability. She's chair of My Bank's Financial Freedom Campaign, and she's a mentor at Oxford University's Accelerator Program, the Creative Destruction Lab. I think you'll really enjoy listening to Louise Hill talk about the journey of building a business, especially one that has a mission that's admirable as you think about teaching kids to be smart with money. So today's episode features Louise Hill, and as we called it, it's never too early to teach kids about money. Louise Hill from GoHenry, and shall I say Acorns GoHenry, thank you so much for joining Electrifying Growth today with me.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm pleased to be here.
Absolutely. And this is technically our second international guest. Our first guest was an American who relocated his company, Charles Gillespie, and gambling.com or gamplinggroup.com, as he would say, to several places in Europe. But you're a legit UK international guest. So this is exciting for us to have someone from the UK joining us today.
Well, I hope you can understand the accent.
No, but my theory is it always makes folks sound smarter. So we Americans would kill for that accent. But be that as it may, as they say, I know you said it's hot over there, so that's sort of a relief, but now you know what they see, I suppose.
Yes, I'm in our London office today, and yesterday was the hottest day of the year in the UK, and I think the hottest day on record for 5 years. So we're working up ahead of steam here in the office.
Well, as we talked about before we even got on here, the theme of teaching kids about money, and we'll get into, there's a broader mission now having combined GoHenry with Acorns, and again, we'll talk about all these things and kind of the broader financial literacy. I'd love to start with this idea of teaching kids about money, and adults for that matter, parents. But I want to talk less about what GoHenry and Acorns do and more about your aha moment to start the company. What led you to say this is a problem that is in need of a solution, so to speak?
I think I've often answered this question by saying I blame my kids. As a parent with 2 kids, 13 years ago now, gosh, it seems like an awful long time. My 2 kids had been lucky enough to be given iPods, if you remember those, for either birthdays or Christmas. And I had given them the login to my iTunes account. And frankly, they were having a great time. They were downloading music without a care in the world. And I was trying to figure out, how do I get them to understand that every time they clicked that button, they were spending money. And this gives away a little bit of my character here. I started printing out the invoices that iTunes used to email you for every 79 pence download, pinning them on the fridge. And then on a Saturday morning, when I was due to give my kids their pocket money, having the conversations with them to say, well, normally I'd give you £5, but guess what? You spent £4.20 on iTunes this week, so you're only going to get 80p. And I'd have these two kids, as you can well imagine, stood in front of me with very sad faces, and me in the role of miserable mum again. And I started talking to other parents about it, really initially as a joke, but to see what they were doing if I was missing a trick. And all these stories came out of the woodwork. Parents whose kids had spent a small fortune on their Xbox or PlayStation or something similar, buying their way through games levels or buying things like scrunchies for their little pony. An 11-year-old boy who'd managed to spend £600 on eBay buying what he thought was a model car, which then turned up at his parents' house on a flatbed truck.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, seriously. And it wasn't a model car at all. It was a real car. And I realized that all of us had another story. We were all having the same problem. Kids had started to use money online without us realizing it. And I couldn't find anything anywhere that gave parents the tools to teach their kids about it, or to give them a tool to help them put controls or limits around it. And that was where the idea came from.
Love it. So those stories start rolling in, and now you say there might be a business here, something even bigger than the initial founding story. So let's go a little bit deeper on okay, it starts to get these stories start rolling. We've got to raise some money. How do you make your next hire? And I have it right. First time CEO, and certainly in this kind of business. So lots of things. What did you do to first start to learn about getting going?
Well, I actually founded an e-commerce business back in...
That's right, before. That's right. My apology.
Yeah, which I sold in 2002. And then I'd gone back into a period of working independently, hiring myself out as a consultant to...
But life changed a lot from the first time to this one.
It changed a huge amount. This time I got together with two other parents. We actually all had kids at the same school. And the three of us set about... We used to meet every Thursday in an Indian restaurant in the town where I live to try and work out, have we got a business model? Could we put together a business model that would work? And we worked on that and iterated and developed it to a point where we felt we'd got something we could take out to angels to try and raise the funding. Spent a lot of time on trains up to London to pitch to various angel groups, etc., to find the funding, and were successful in doing that. And my role in the business, I started out as Chief Operating Officer, and one of the other founders was CEO. And we took the big leap, I guess. We gave up the day job.
How long from the aha moment to giving up the day job? And what was it? What did you know that you had enough of to sort of give it a go?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The timeline probably took the best of 18 months. We figured out the business plan and realized pretty early on that we needed to raise about £750,000 in order to get the business off the ground, because in order to fund a prepaid card, an app, we needed to plug into all of the banking systems, and that's reasonably costly. So we set about finding that money. We thought we'd found it fairly early on, probably about 8-9 months in, with a family bank that committed to put in probably 2/3 of the money, and then the rest from individual angels. But right at the last minute, the best way I can describe it is son number 3 flew in from another country and decided he didn't like it at all, and the family bank withdrew. Yes, that was not a good journey home on the train. That was a real setback. We'd put a huge amount of work in. We were holding down the day jobs at the same time. All of us had young kids, a lot of work and effort that had gone into that. But as you always do when you're trying to run a business, we regrouped, went back and found other investors. But the whole process probably took 18 months until we had sufficient funds to give up the day job and start work.
Was that sort of lead investor, for lack of a better word, pulling it away? There's sort of a real moment of truth there, right? So you still have your day job, as you said, but this has to be one of those, do we really believe if they don't believe?
Yeah.
Many of those on the journey of building a business, but
There really are. Yeah. I mean,
was it a belief in the mission, or was it the founders together said we can't give up? What was the thing that kept you going, so to speak?
I think an unwavering belief that the way that people were using money was changing, and nothing that we were seeing anywhere was taking into account children and how children needed to use money. And it's a phrase I've used an awful lot over the years. We were leaving kids behind. We're still leaving kids behind now, unless they've got GoHenry, of course. But
this is a good segue for me to tell our audience that, in disclosure, Edison has the privilege still, but we invested in GoHenry. We'll talk a little about this merger and the Acorns relationship and how that's going. But I just want to make sure with our audience that we shared your belief when we heard the story that, and we saw it in the US as well, that this sort of financial literacy is a big topic, but how you actually do it and the children remain an underserved market.
They really do. And yes, thank you to Edison for your belief in us. You led our A series and allowed us to ramp up our growth, and particularly to step to the US and start rolling out in the US. But you're right. There are many points in the process as a business founder, as anyone who's tried to do that will know, where you will get a knockback, be that from an investor or at any point in the process, really, where you have to ask yourself, do I believe what they're saying, or do I still believe we're right? I don't know whether it's resilience, grit, or sheer stubbornness, or whether they're all actually the same thing. But, you know, we've been asked over the years, particularly in the early fundraising, I've been told that this should have been a charity, that we'd never make a commercial business out of it, you know, all sorts of things like that. And I have never struggled with the concept that you can be a commercial business, but still have a very, very clear mission and ethos behind you to do good. And fundamentally, our mission statement at GoHenry is to make every kid smart with money. Those words are chosen very carefully. We are a subscription model. Customers have to pay for our services, but we put a huge amount of effort outside of GoHenry as well into lobbying for financial literacy education in schools, for working with charities who provide financial education to the less privileged in society. And, you know, it's a core part of who we are as a business.
So it's interesting because your comment, we started to go down this path. Let's go down a little deeper. What GoHenry is, what it does. And to your point about, I sometimes call these double bottom line businesses, and I don't love them, but as long as the first bottom line is clear and the second in some way is, as you said, it influences, it does good. You all had a very clear mind that, yeah, this is going to be a business that makes profits, but we can actually do good in doing so. But let's talk a little bit about GoHenry, maybe not so much at the start, maybe 5 years ago, how you've added even more around this sort of teaching kids, making kids smart with money. We'll get to Acorns in a moment, but the idea of, I looked at it not just personally as, how do I get my kids allowance or kids that get their allowance on? I really believed in the education part. So, and also getting to the parents with a mission that's more than just putting money on a debit card and making sure the car doesn't show up in the driveway from eBay instead of a model. Talk a little about the kind of how the price evolved over the last 5 years, what it is and how you've added to it.
So when we first launched, we would talk about the 3 pillars of money management, and we talked about earning, saving, and spending responsibly. And as we saw what our customers did with the tools and saw how they spent their money and listened to customers in terms of how they interacted with us, we fairly quickly added in a giving pillar. We introduced the idea of micro donations. And in the UK, we partnered with the largest child charity in the UK, which is called the NSPCC. Every child in the UK knows Childline, which is a telephone helpline for any child in distress. And in the US, we partnered with the Boys and Girls Club of America. And we allowed kids to make micro donations to those charities. I don't think I know offhand the sums for the donations to the US charity, but I do know that in the UK, GoHenry kids have donated over £650,000 to the NSPCC over the past few years. You know, it is a phenomenal amount. And I think all the more powerful that it is children donating money to support less fortunate kids. That's really powerful. And that's part of the educational side of it. We want to teach kids that money has to be earned. It doesn't grow on trees, to use all the old phrases, that they need to save their money up, save a portion of their money up, to save for the future, to save for bigger purchases, that they need to spend responsibly, so within limits. And then that one of the things that money gives you is the opportunity to help others less fortunate, so the giving pillar. But we also added to that probably 5 years ago with developing what we call money missions. And money missions are bite-size, in-app money skills lessons. They cover a full curriculum in line with each of the national education guidelines. They're developed with teachers and financial experts, but they are very much presented in the way that kids take on board information and learn these days.
As we said a few years ago, gamification of this literacy.
Absolutely. So it's all about gamification. There are little video clips, there are Quizlets, there are multiple choice, there are cartoons, all kinds of things. And they cover money basics, earning, saving, borrowing, credit, investing, money safety online, all sorts of things like that. And they're broken into 3 age groups. So if you think that our services are offered from the age of 6 all the way through to the age of 18, we break that into 6 to 10, 10 to 14, and 14 plus. And obviously what you're talking, you know, in the 14 plus money missions, we're talking about compound interest, investing in stocks and shares, building your wealth, cryptocurrency. And for a 6-year-old, it's a very different level. It's far more about earning money, saving to buy a bigger item rather than spending everything on sweets this week. So it's age and stage appropriate. And one of the really interesting things out of that, actually, for me, was realizing, particularly as we developed some of the money missions for the slightly older kids, was hearing from parents to say, oh my God, my 12-year-old has just started talking to me about compound interest. Help.
Right. They're smarter than me. Oh my God.
Well, what we've done out of that is to produce some content for parents, particularly on topics like cryptocurrency or investing. And that's great. That's great if we can get more information out there in bite-sized, easy to understand language.
Because you're a consumer-oriented business, it's a great time to make sure the listeners, we can get some customers too, in all disclosure. But at the end of the day, I think everyone gets the mission that how can that be bad? Okay, so the skeptic says, so what does it cost me? How much? This is a monthly, as you said, subscription model. You get a debit card. So the kids think it's cool because, again, disclosure, not only an investor, but my kids have been GoHenry card holders for a long time. But talk a little bit about pricing. And even to that point, how did you even come up with pricing? Because when you're an entrepreneur, it's like a finger in the wind, right?
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, I think we started out, I'm casting my mind back now, I think we started out at £1 a month, which was over-optimistic. Over-optimistic.
It's also cheap, but yeah, people go away.
Over-optimistic in thinking that we could keep the price that low is actually what I mean. So in the UK, we have 3 different tiers. We have our everyday tier, which is at £3.99 a month. We have a plus tier, $5.99 a month. And particularly for larger families, we have a max tier, which is $9.99 a month, but for up to 4 children. And there are different services embedded into each of those tiers. All of them, the children can choose fun card designs, personalized with their name. So GoHenry changes into Go Chris or Go Louise or whatever they want it to. And we have a range of designs. You know, every now and then we have design competitions and new designs released. We do a range with the World Wildlife Fund where donations go to protect endangered species, all sorts of different fun designs. And in our plus tier, we're offering 4.5%, I think you call it APY in the US, interest rate on savings accounts for kids. And we pay that interest out on a daily basis because we want the kids to get the message.
See that money's coming their way.
Money's coming their way. Ping, here's another 2 pence. Ping, as they save, they see the results of their saving. And we offer 1% cash back on all in-store spend. And those benefits and additional extras increase as you go up through the tiers. In the US at the moment, we only have 2 tiers. We have a single child kind of everyday tier at $4.99. And then we have a family tier at $9.90. I think it's 98.
And on the latter one, I could have all my kids if I've got whether 2 or 5 kids, I can get them all.
Yeah, exactly. And those tiers have only been introduced in the last year. And what's been amazing to see is the customer response to them. Uptake of the more premium tiers has been far higher than we'd hoped for. And also really good to see the stickiness of those customers, that the customers who are choosing the higher level tiers with more premium services within them, they are more engaged, they're staying with us longer, they're using the product more. And it's great to hear that, get the feedback from them and understand which bits they're really using, which bits they're not using, because that helps us shape a product market fit as we move forward.
Sure. So if we alluded to this a couple times about this merger with, and I would back up for, again, the audience's sake, but also just to make sure the conversation is level set with some context. GoHenry was a UK-based only business. And when we got to know you all, we love the idea of, hey, let us help you with not only capital, but our own expertise come to the US. And in that journey together, we actually acquired a business that we allowed us to enter into Italy and France. And now here we are with getting bigger, but also the challenges of growing a business, et cetera, consumer, US, big market. And then here comes, one of our friendlies. Wouldn't we call it a competitor? Because Acorns had a different customer set. Comes along, and I'm sure our version and their version of how we got together are not so much important, but the bottom line is we did a deal 1.5 years ago, roughly together. And I guess I'd love to hear you talk about, 1, the footprint of GoHenry today. Obviously, Acorns helped us expand in the US, and 2, good, bad, to the extent you want to talk about bad, but good and unexpected maybe of how this combination has gone and kind of where you see the company going even in the future too.
Yeah, it's been, as so many stages of our growth it's been an amazing journey. We started talking to Acorns, as you'll know, Chris, quite some time ago, and decided we'd bide our time a little bit before we came together. And then we started working on coming together. The attraction for both parties was completing almost the missing bit. So GoHenry was all about kids and is still all about kids. So it's from age 6 to 18. As you mentioned, we bought Pixpay in 2020, and that they were already in France and Spain. And with them, we expanded them into Italy.
I said Italy before. That's right. Italy was an expansion.
Exactly. So we were growing in Europe. We already had a footprint in the States. But one of the questions we've faced for years is, well, what happens when the children reach 18? They drop off the end. And Chris will have heard from me many times before, particularly when we were pitching to Edison, that my answer was always, yes, but there's another cohort of 6-year-olds coming in the bottom every year, and there is huge international expansion potential available.
Right.
From an Acorns perspective, they started actually not a dissimilar time to us. They have their 10th anniversary coming up in September, and they offer investing for what they call the everyday American. So easy access to investing and savings. They had a whole suite of offerings for adults, but adults only. So they knew they were tapping into the young adult market with individual services. They were tapping into the young couples market. They had a retirement product. They do have a UGMA, so a Save for Your Kids product, but they didn't have anything that looked like GoHenry. They didn't have a service for parents to use with their kids. So by coming together, what that's enabled for both of us is to offer services to an individual's entire life cycle. And I always start drawing circles in the air when I start talking about this, because as you can imagine, all of the graphics we have relate to a circular life.
To this journey.
Yeah. And it means whether you are a 22-year-old, 24-year-old setting out at work, we have services for you with Acorns. If you're a young married in your late 20s, early 30s, there are products for you. As soon as you have kids, we have products for you. We have products for your retirement. The whole way through a life cycle, we have services and products that we can offer. And the subscription packages can adjust and flex to reflect which services are relevant for which demographic at each stage of their life. And that is hugely exciting to me. And I know to Noah as well, who's the global CEO, and allows us to start offering those services. Of course, we've started in the US because GoHenry already existed in the US. And one of the first things we did was to include GoHenry US in the Acorns premium tier. And really in a very, very simplistic way. So we literally put the two of them together, and it was as simple as a click-through link. So if you were a Acorns premium customer, you could click through, land on GoHenry, but you had to sign up again. You had to go through the identification, verification process again, but you got GoHenry for free. And that, even as a very crude test, let us see just how many Acorns premium customers were keen to sign up for GoHenry. And it's been fantastic. So we saw rapid results from that. We've fast-tracked integration. We're at a point where we've got single sign-on. We've got a number of other things integrated into the products. We're moving to a place where if you have the Acorns app and you're using GoHenry, you can see all your key stats that you need within the Acorns app. And we're integrating those products, those two services more and more. And because we've seen the growth there, whilst we continue to integrate the two services so that they get slicker and slicker from a customer experience perspective, we've already started to really push hard on advertising that out and pushing it out to the market because we're getting great results.
Let's talk about lessons learned and go all the way back. And I often call this both lessons and the surprises of being an entrepreneur and growing a company. So you've got all the way back to the 10 years ago or so of starting the journey. Share a lesson or two with other entrepreneurs. And as you noted, and I apologize for the correction there, you've done this a couple of times, but sort of with gaps. What is your sort of advice for the young entrepreneur that has a little something going, not just the business plan, but lessons either directly or indirectly?
One absolute lesson that actually came from that first business I built. I always wanted to grow that business to be a big business, but I don't think I really thought about that when I set it up. And what happened, I mean, we were incredibly fortunate. We ran it for 4 years. We were successful. We were making a profit. We were paying ourselves a decent salary, but we had absolutely bootstrapped. And there were only 5 of us in the business. And we wanted to expand. And this huge jolt of realization hit me that if I stepped away from the business to fundraise, to really go out there and try and find funding, the business would fall over. And that's not me being arrogant. We were running it on such a sheet. We were doing everything. And we didn't have enough money in the bank to hire somebody in who could do the day job whilst I went and spent 50% of my time on fundraising. And that was a bit of a shock to me. I hadn't thought ahead about that. And we were very fortunate. We sold the business to a large retail group. And so we lived to ride again.
What was it? Are you saying the kind of the number one reason you sold was the lack of scalability from a management team, from a bandwidth perspective?
So when it came to starting GoHenry, I was adamant that we would build for scale from day one. And I talked a little bit about raising £750,000. One of the reasons for that was making sure that we were partnered with, I've always used the phrase world-class partners, but we were partnered with partners who were already much larger scale than we were, so that we didn't have to change out the entire supply chain as 2 years down the line. Because as anybody involved in scaling a business knows, the minute you have to start rebuilding your infrastructure, if you're not careful, your whole business falls over because the focus goes on that. And
the dreaded tech debt, as they say.
Exactly. So I was adamant I was not going to fall into that trap again. So that's one tip. If you want to grow a big business, think about scale from day one and don't let it hit you between the eyes as it did me. And then I think the other one, and I know I've talked about this quite a lot in public, there was a point in time, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, when we were really growing quickly at GoHenry. We were hiring more and more people. I was certainly working flat out, crazy hours. And I suddenly realized that I had become a roadblock. Now, remember, at that point in time, I was chief operating officer. And so an awful lot of budget controls, processes, systems, all kinds of things came through me.
Many, if not all, roads led back to you.
They did. And every time we needed to do something, somehow I needed to be involved. And I realized that was creating a risk for the business. And it was going to stop us growing as quickly as we needed to. I started a campaign across the business to identify what we call single points of failure. And my name appeared rather a lot in it. And we spent a lot of time and effort over that following 6 months removing those single points of failure. And I don't mean shooting people, but making sure that processes and knowledge were disseminated across the business, responsibilities were really well delegated, and it wasn't a case that if somebody went off sick for 3 months, things would fall over.
Right, things would stop. Right,
Yeah.
right.
And that's another gotcha, if you like, that I would say, look out for. Don't let that creep up on you, because it's a real trap to fall into.
So we'll say so far so good with proving that this thesis of the kids' journey, along with a target market that Acorns is serving, that keeps going on the surface level, and the attachment, if you will, to electing a GoHenry option, does seem like the Acorns customer cares, which is awesome. But go back a year and a half ago to today, private to private, first of all, we won't go full private equity venture capital lessons learned or do a tutorial on that, but more from the operating, I hate to say gotchas, but whether you're on the side of the seller or the buyer, there's all the things you don't think about. There's probably one or two that you say, this is top of mind for someone's asking me about selling their business and still being involved in their business.
I think it's interesting. Acorns have not acted in a seller-buyer
Sort of heavy-handed, right?
way at all. I mean, Noah and Seth, that's the global CEO is Noah, and the global president, Seth, are both incredibly forthright individuals. They put a lot of store on what they call operators, and have given me certainly a huge amount of space and support to run GoHenry and to share my thoughts and take decisions. One of the questions right at the beginning for me was, is this a real job? Is it a figurehead?
Right. Are you just in control of the dollars or making sure people show up to work?
Exactly. Is it a figurehead that does what Acorns says, or is it a real job? If it's a figurehead, I care enough about the company that I'm here to do that for a period of time, but that's never going to be me long term. And the answer then was, no, it isn't. It's a real job. And the evidence over the last year and a half is absolutely it's a real job, and it's keeping me very busy, and I love it.
So one bit of advice is clarify roles early and make sure expectations, because that's making you, it seems, more satisfied. They told you one thing and then it became another. It's always that's never good in business, but that's one tip for an entrepreneur that's going to sell their business and you're going to be asked to keep going. Let's understand what you want me to do. And whether you want to do it, I guess, is the other.
Yeah, well, it is. But no, it's great. We're working more and more closely together. We're gradually bringing parts of the company together. We're moving on to the same software for, recording contracts, or, gradually bringing things together, looking for the big wins. Obviously, we've moved on most of the big wins already, but there's still loads more to do. And the opportunity is out there. One of the stats that we shared with the teams just a couple of weeks ago, it was Seth actually who brought this to the surface. There are 75 million kids in the US. That's more than the entire population of the UK. So the opportunity in the US for GoHenry is enormous.
Yeah. Enormous. One stat I love, and I want to know if it's still true, because in having merged, sold the company, we stepped out of the board and more observer kind of thing. And so we're a little bit further away, but a statistic I love, because I think parents don't know this, in terms of kids forming their opinions about money, that I think just sticks with me. Is the age still in that
Yes.
is sort of the headline.
So,
But
yeah, no, I think the fact that you're referring to there is that there is a study by Cambridge University, a very famous study that is often referred to in financial literacy circles, that kids form money habits. They actually start behaving and forming their money habits at the age of 7.
amazing.
And
I thought I knew it was 7, but I wanted to make sure I didn't screw that up. But that's got to surprise folks who are listening going, wait. And that's from, to your point, habits. Money does grow on trees. Oh my gosh, I have no money. My family is struggling, or
nobody at home talks about money.
right, it's not a topic we talk about.
It's a hidden topic. Or I see my parents worrying about money, or whatever that is. Those behaviors and habits start to form from the age of 7. So that's why we lobby so hard for financial education to be in schools from primary school upwards. That's why we offer our services from the age of 6 and above. Yeah.
From the perspective of a parent who's got college age and high school age, you always realize or hope they're learning all those lessons you teach them when they're young. But the fact that they're also paying attention to things you don't talk about, and that's kind of the money point, which is pretty remarkable. I want to close with one question. I try to ask this similarly to all the guests, and I call it when I was 25. It could be 30, but the bottom line is a reference point to when you go back. And it's not so much, I definitely don't look at it from a question of regrets, because I think none of us should have any. I think the real flavor is, if I knew then what I know now, what would I do more of or less of? And I always try to say to people, just give me one thing.
Super easy in my case, directly related to money. I wish somebody had told me about investing. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't start doing it until only a few years ago. And gosh, what a missed opportunity
The magic of compound interest, right?
Yeah. And as all parents do, you try and make sure your kids don't make the same mistakes. I have brought my 2 up who are now 26 and 23. And my goodness, I have lectured the 2 of them about opening stocks and shares investment funds and putting a little away and leaving it there and doing it often.
It's the joke about the shoemakers, what the shape of their shoes. It's here you are growing a business about money, and you're saying to yourself, why didn't someone tell me about this? So that's fantastic. Louise Hill, it's been a pleasure to get not only have the pleasure of investing in the business that started, watching the journey, being part of the journey, and wishing and hoping for all the best as Acorns GoHenry conquers the world. But I love the stat about 75 million kids yet to be, nearly all those kids yet to be kind of taught about money. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you stay cool and enjoy the rest of your summer in the UK. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you for your support over the years.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining this episode of Electrifying Growth. A special thanks to this week's guest for sharing their time and insight. For more resources, inspiration, and a look inside the Edison Partners network, sign up for our newsletter at www.edisonpartners.com. Click on the Stay in the Know button in the top right corner of our webpage. Thank you again.